Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. In this video, we will present the court evidence setting out the reasons why McLaren are sabotaging Oscar Piastri in favour of Lando Norris, and show how the top Formula One boss leaving in the wake of stunning eyewitness court statement claiming that Zak Brown, the McLaren CEO, never wanted Oscar Piastri, points to McLaren being a Formula One stooge, and finally, how all these developments signal the beginning of the end of the Liberty Media-induced period of race manipulation. By way of a brief background, from the outset, Liberty Media had made clear their intention to end the dominance of Sir Lewis and Mercedes-Benz when they took over Formula One. And as we all now know, they colluded with a string of other people to try and usher the GOAT out of F1 altogether, but Ferrari put a spoke in their plans. As it stands now, Sir Lewis's tenure in F1 has outlived many of his haters, including former Red Bull Supremo Dietrich Mateschitz, former FIA Chairman John Todt, former FIA Chief Steward Michael Masi, former Red Bull team principal Christian Horner, and now John Malone, the billionaire media mogul and soon-to-be former chairman of F1's parent company. It is instructive that even though Malone's face was plastered all over the news during the acquisition, his retirement has gone relatively unheralded without any reference to it on Formula One's website. This is particularly telling because it is a clear sign that the sport was nothing more than an item in his balance sheet, otherwise there should have been some reference to the amazing and wonderful things he has done for F1, how he would be sorely missed, etc. 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 Instead, all we have are matter-of-fact side notes in some of the lamestream media. But here's the thing, we have been saying all along that he is the one with the influence to compel the lamestream media to gaslight all the WWE-style manipulation that has become his legacy to the sport. Unfortunately for him and his cronies, it is unlikely that his successor will be able to exert that same level of influence, and the gaslighting walls of Jericho that he has built to protect the manipulation are about to come tumbling down. As it always happens, the storms that are about to break down the wall have been gathering hurricane force offshore. To start with, they have never been able to suppress the hurricane from Abu Dhabi 2021, despite their best efforts, and now, as we showed you in our previous video, a new storm is gathering from Australia that will be making landfall just as Darth Vader is departing, and the Empire will be at its most vulnerable. But before going further, if you are enjoying this video, we invite those of you who haven't yet done so, to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification icon, to be notified when the next one is uploaded. We'd also like to urge those of you who haven't yet done so, to sign our online petition for an inquiry into the BBC and Channel 4's coverage of Lewis Hamilton and Abu Dhabi, which we have amended to include Gary Lineker's sacking by the BBC. A link has been provided in the description. If you are on X, then please repost our tweet. Thank you. Back to the gathering storms threatening to destroy Malone's walls of Jericho. In a bombshell eyewitness court testimony, during an ongoing case at the London Commercial Courts, a US IndyCar multiple world champion, Alex Palou has sensationally claimed that Zak Brown never wanted Oscar Piastri as his second driver, and led the IndyCar superstar to believe that he was a shoo-in for the seat. The discussions started in 2022, and Alex, who is now a four-time world champion, has alleged that Zak told him that it was not his decision to appoint Oscar, it was the then team manager that had made that choice. Alex claimed that Zak led him to believe that him getting the seat would not be affected by Oscar, and based on those assurances and a $400,000 signing-on bonus, he became McLaren's reserve driver in 2023, with the expectation that he will become a senior driver in 2024. However, Alex subsequently became unsettled by developments in 2023, when McLaren announced the extension of Oscar's contract until 2026, so he pulled out. An irate McLaren then initiated a lawsuit in the London Commercial Courts, seeking some $30 million or so in damages. Now here's the multi-million-dollar question. Why would McLaren be so irate about Alex pulling out when Oscar was leading the World Championship by a country mile? Furthermore, How did they come up with damages in excess of $30 million when the signing-on bonus was only $400,000? Now, when people go to court in this type of situation, they are supposed to consider the unintended consequences of their actions before forging ahead with the suit. It would appear that on this occasion, McLaren had not considered that as part of his defense, Alex would reveal that Zak had led him to believe that he was a shoo-in for Oscar's seat at the time that they were facing a storm of allegations that they have been sabotaging Oscar to favor Lando. Both parties have acknowledged that it was only Oscar's seat that was up for grabs. But why should that have been the case, seeing as there are 2 seats available? Why would McLaren not want the best 2 drivers? Well, the answer is very simple. Lando's dad has been paying for his seat in McLaren, dating back to 2021. As the founder of the stockbroking firm Hargreaves Lansdowne, who is believed to be sitting on a $200 million cash pile, he has been bankrolling his son's F1 career, reportedly to the tune of some $44 million, by the time Lando was upgraded to reserve driver in 2018. Norris Jr. landed the coveted race seat in 2019 in a 3-year deal costing Norris Sr. $12 million a year. The 3-year contract that Lando signed with McLaren in 2021 was bankrolled by his father to the tune of $5 million per year, and he paid the $15 million upfront. So, given Oscar's relatively more modest background in comparison to Lando's, you can perhaps see why it was only his seat that was up for grabs. Furthermore, given McLaren's own court testimony that they lost a potential $23 million sponsorship deal with IndyCar sponsor NTT that was reportedly designed around Palu, you can begin to understand that we are now living in a world where sponsorship outranks talent. If you now consider that as an American who was in fellow American Malone's inner circle, Zak would be acutely aware that getting a world champion IndyCar driver would align perfectly with the master plan of selling the sport to America. Under these circumstances, you can appreciate why McLaren would be irate over Alex backing out, and why they would prefer Lando to win instead of Oscar. Having Lando, who is being bankrolled by his millionaire father, and Alex, who can bring heavy-hitting American sponsors on board as their drivers, would generate more money for the team than any combination which included Oscar. A Lando world champion and an Oscar runner-up would also generate more money for the team than an Oscar world champion and Lando runner-up would generate. So, when Oscar was running away with the title, McLaren had to act accordingly. How else can you explain the sudden drop in the performance of Oscar's car? How else can you explain Lando being able to decide Oscar's pit strategy, for example in Singapore? How else can you explain Lando always getting the better of the papaya rules? Well, here's the thing. For McLaren's machinations to have the best chance of succeeding, they needed the support of Malone's F1. The evidence suggesting that F1 and McLaren were working together to sabotage Oscar can be found in instances such as Silverstone, where the young Aussie was unfairly penalized for Max's infraction and his team chose not to accede to his request for him and Lando to switch places to give him the win that would have been his but for the unfair penalty. Again, in Singapore, when Lando unfairly barged him out of the way, both McLaren and the FIA did nothing. So, you can see the pattern. But here's yet another clincher to show that McLaren is working hand in glove with Formula One. A simple search of the F1 website does not produce any content celebrating what Oscar had been doing earlier in the season when he was leading the World Championship by a country mile. There is no, get to know maybe the coolest, calmest F1 driver in history, like even the second-string lamestream media like the BBC did earlier in the season. Or, who is Oscar Piastri? A closer look at the 24-year-old Aussie who's taking F1 by storm. Why have F1 not provided any content giving fans a closer look at the young man who was on target to be Australia's first world champion since Alan Jones some 45 years ago in 1980? Could it be because, like McLaren, they don't want him to be world champion because in their opinion it would decrease their bottom line? Is this what Formula One is all about now? Red Bull used their sponsorship money to force F1 to install Max as champion, because if you recall, they threatened to withdraw from the sport unless the rules were changed to let them race as they claimed at the time. Now, McLaren are sabotaging Oscar for a pay driver whose father is bankrolling his career, while suing an IndyCar US superstar who has dented their chances of making more money in the US. Is F1 a glorified advertising platform for sponsors or the premier motorsport in the world? Is it about getting the best drivers in the best cars or about getting the drivers with the biggest sponsors in the cars that have been allowed to gain illicit technological advantage? Is it about isolating a select group of drivers to compete for the world title while the others provide the backdrop like they have been doing since Abu Dhabi? As we showed in our previous video, Malone is having to work harder to get the lamestream to gaslight the sabotaging of Oscar, extending even into Australia, where the media who were initially clamoring that Oscar was being dudded have now suddenly reversed their tune. But despite all the gaslighting, we can see that Lando is fast becoming an F1 villain who is being booed by fans at circuits around the world and also getting trolled on social media. McLaren are also suffering serious reputational damage as they have been exposed as an F1 stooge, as the public perception that they are sabotaging Oscar for financial gain has been corroborated by Alex in court. So, this is not the best of times for Malone to retire, because not only are corporations most vulnerable during a transition period, it is only to be expected that his successor will not have the clout to maintain the level of gaslighting that he has been able to. It appears to all intent and purposes that Sir Lewis is the last original world champion, whose titles are untainted by manipulation. In fact, he has had to overcome the same type of obstacles that Oscar may not be able to overcome. Forza Ferrari.